Spain, Norway and Slovenia recognize
the State of Palestine.
A diplomatic tide turns at the United Nations as Western recognitions of a Palestinian state surge. Will policy changes follow? We ask an Irish Foreign Affairs Minister.
Ireland has been consistent in obviously wanting to recognise and recognising the State of Palestine to give hope that this is the path forward for the people of Gaza. But we have been extremely clear in our belief that the bloodshed needs to stop now.
But will this new wave of recognitions shift the focus away from Israel's actions in Gaza, which a UN commission has now labelled a genocide? We speak with a member of the commission.
Recognising the State of Palestine at this time is implementing what was decided by the General Assembly in 1947. But it's not enough. We have to stop the killing of Palestinians, the suffering of Palestinians, the starving of Palestinians.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Rida Fakhri. At the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, recognition of Palestine has surged onto centre stage. Nations including Britain, Canada, Australia and France have now joined a growing list of governments that have formally recognised the State of Palestine. This marks a clear turn among some of Israel's Western allies. Over 150 countries now recognise Palestinian statehood. That's around 80% of UN member states. But will the move by Western governments to recognise Palestine now undermine any legal and political efforts to bring justice and accountability? Some nations, like Ireland, which recognised Palestine last year, argue that recognition is both a moral imperative and a practical step towards a viable peace. Joining us now is Neale Richmond, Ireland's Minister of State for International Development and the Diaspora. Minister of State Neale Richmond, Ireland was one of 3 European nations to have recognised the State of Palestine last year. It was the 142nd country to have done so. Now it's about 150 nations around the world. At the United Nations General Assembly, this is a hugely symbolic moment. But outside, does it make any difference?
I think it does, because there's 2 main reasons why Ireland made this decision over 14 months ago with our friends in Spain and Norway. Firstly, it's to make sure that we return the focus onto what has to be the absolute solution here. That's a 2-state solution, because we have to make sure that everyone knows that this is the way forward. And secondly, on a very basic, humane level, we have to say that we stand with the people of Gaza. Where we are today, sitting in a situation where the UN Commission has declared this a genocide, and we're looking at a man-made famine.
Precisely, Minister, precisely. Shouldn't the focus then be on stopping the genocide, taking the punitive measures that need to be taken against Israel to stop the genocide now, instead of recognising a fictive state?
Well, it's not about either or. It's not a binary decision. Ireland has been consistent in obviously wanting to recognise and recognising the State of Palestine to give hope that this is the path forward for the people of Gaza. But we have been extremely clear in our belief that the bloodshed needs to stop now. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need Israel to engage in genuine peace talks. And we need to see humanitarian aid actually being let into Gaza at a European Union level.
So what are you doing to make that happen? Because you do have quite a bit of leverage. The EU is Israel's largest trading partner. What are you doing to use any of those levers?
So 2 things. The first thing that Ireland is doing on a domestic point is that we have legislation in relation to the occupied Palestinian territories. This is on foot of the ICJ judgment of July of last year. This means that we'll put a ban on all imports from the occupied Palestinian territories coming into Ireland. This is something we can do parallel to the European Union process, and a number of other EU member states will follow. It's first in the class type of legislation. The second thing at a European level is Ireland proposed over 14 months ago with Spain that the EU-Israel association agreement be reviewed and reopened under Article 2 due to our opinion that very real human rights abuses are going on in Gaza. So now we're working extremely hard within the EU to get a qualified majority vote when that comes to a European Council in the coming days and weeks.
Is that the best?
That would be a real measure.
Minister, is that the best the EU can do 2 years into this genocide? Because saying that you will be looking into changing the terms of this preferential trade agreement between the EU and Israel isn't enough, is it? When you consider all of the other measures that can be taken, sanctions.
No, it's not. But I think it's really important.
An embargo on arms sales. Why aren't you looking at these issues?
But I think it's really important to say that this isn't something we're looking into. This is something that we're going to do. We're taking a vote on. Yes, it will change the trading relationship, but it'll also, parallel to that, we will have a sanction process. We've named 2 Israeli government ministers. We've named a series of illegal Israeli settlers, as well as the leadership of Hamas. That is real sanctions that are going to take place. Ireland has been the most vocal within the European Union, but we have to build alliances and we have to move along. Just a number of weeks ago, we see Germany announcing, Germany of all countries, one of Israel's strongest supporters in the European Union, have announced that they're stopping sales of arms to Israel. We want to continue this progress. I'm not for an instant going to say it's enough or it's moving quick enough. Ireland, obviously, along with our friends in Spain and Slovenia and indeed Luxembourg, would wish that the EU was going a lot further, a lot sooner. We believe what Israel is doing is immoral, and we ultimately have to get the bloodshed to stop.
But again, Minister, with respect, what the world sees is that countries like Ireland, despite all of your best intentions, aren't doing enough to stop the genocide and the bloodshed.
Well, I take quite issue that, particularly in the position of Ireland. Ireland has been the leader within the European Union. If you look at what we've been able to do at a domestic level, we have increased the level of humanitarian aid that we've given to Gaza. When all the other EU member states wanted to stop funding UNRWA, Ireland said no, and we managed to get that decision changed. We've worked consistently to help people from Gaza get out to receive medical attention, both in Ireland and around the EU, as well as those being able to continue their studies. We have been a party to the ICJ case with South Africa. We are doing everything in our powers. The level of opinion on the European Union is quite split. There are member states who very much at the start of this outbreak stood foursquare behind Israel. That has absolutely changed in the last number of months, in particular because of the horrific genocide that we're seeing in front of our eyes. But we are starting to see real movement. We have to continue.
Minister, Ireland has indeed long stood firm in its support for the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. But there are critics of your government who believe that Ireland could do far more. Some Palestine activists in Ireland say Ireland is allowing US military planes potentially carrying weapons to Israel to pass through Shannon Airport without inspections. They point to the fact that the Irish bill to ban all trade with illegal Israeli settlement is now in its 7th year in limbo, essentially going nowhere. What do you say to all of this?
First, in relation to the Occupied Territories Bill, the Irish government were only given the pathway to pass a version of this bill from July of 2024. The original bill didn't just refer to Palestine, and equally it didn't comply with EU or international law. However, the ruling of the ICJ, once that came through, our Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister tasked our Attorney General to come up with a version of the bill. And we're doing that with the original author of the bill, the independent senator. And we hope to have that passed and enacted in the coming weeks and months. In relation to the use of Shannon by US military, there are inspections and there are requirements for any aircraft going through either Irish airspace or stopping at Shannon Airport to declare their goods and their onward destination. And we've been very open about that.
But can you say unequivocally that there are no weapons that are being transported through Shannon Airport bound to Israel?
We have not been notified by the American authorities. Our Department of Transport investigates every payload, and everything that's going on from Shannon is going on to a destination, be it in Germany or Italy. We've been very clear with our American friends in relation to that.
Does the Irish government believe that the time has come for sanctions against Israel?
Absolutely, and we'll be voting in the European Council to sanction 2 Israeli government ministers and all Israeli illegal settlers that have been named. That is the proposal of the European Commission. We will back that.
Minister, you know that this isn't going to make any difference. You're talking about 2 ministers. You're not sanctioning the whole government.
We're talking about 2 ministers and the number of illegal settlers. It's a first step. I think it can't be dismissed that this is a first step. Ireland, of course, wants more and has pushed for more. But to be honest, our number one priority, my number one priority as the minister in Ireland who looks after international development and our ODA, is to actually get real levels of ODA, humanitarian assistance, into the people of Gaza. We need to get hundreds of trucks in every day rather than the trickle of 90 to 100. Secondly, we need the bloodshed to stop, and we will work with all partners. We will support, be it the Qataris, the Americans, the Egyptians, anyone who can put the pressure to bear on both the Israeli government and Hamas to stop this bloody violence.
How do you respond to those who say that this recognition is a mere distraction, that it's a ploy, a maneuver, whose real purpose is really to save Israel from itself and give it the right to continue as a Jewish supremacist state while undermining any prospect of real sovereignty on the part of a Palestinian state? You're asking for Palestine to be demilitarized, to not have an army or an air force, essentially to not have the right to defend itself. Does that make it a sovereign state?
I think that's a very cynical take. What we're saying, and what we've been saying since Ireland officially recognised Palestine with our friends in Spain and Norway, is we believe in, firstly, the two-state solution. Secondly, we believe in an independent Palestine where the people are sovereign, where they have the same rights of any state around the world. When we recognise the state, when we embrace the Palestinian ambassador, be it at a UN level or a bilateral level, it's first and foremost, it is an absolute dismissal of the role of Hamas, but equally it's a dismissal of a very clear Israeli policy that does not recognize the two-state solution, despite the fact that this is the global agreement of what the pathway must be. If we do not put out very clearly our belief in the recognition of a Palestinian state, our belief in the two-state solution, it actually is giving Israel carte blanche to continue with this horrendous campaign that flies in the face of international law.
Your statements are defying reality. The Israelis themselves, Prime Minister Netanyahu has made very clear, he has said there will be absolutely no Palestinian state. In fact, he said that this recognition would only speed up his government's efforts to annex the West Bank and presumably to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Nothing that is being done is going to put a stop to this, is it?
The short-term goals of the Israeli government of a hard, large-scale military bombardment and excessive seizing of illegal territories will not be able to continue going forward. The current contemporary actions of this particular Israeli government that flies in the face of the protests in streets in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa and everywhere else, that flies in face of the EU, of the international spectrum, cannot continue.
Minister, what state are you recognizing? What state are we speaking about?
We're recognizing by the very clear administration that is in place. We have proper ambassadors. There is a Palestinian Authority. They need to be given a blueprint going forward that they will be part of the global order. But
the West Bank is on the verge of being annexed. Gaza has been completely destroyed. Why declare the recognition of a state before you stop the killing and erasure of that state?
Well, two things in that regard. Firstly, there will be a Palestinian state going forward based on the very clear agreements that are there in practice at the moment. And what we have declared from Ireland is that we will be part of the global community that helps rebuild Palestine, that helps rebuild genuine homes, medical facilities, schools, and everything else. And we are not afraid to put our money where our mouth is. But secondly, recognizing Palestine now brings us back to the very clear end solution to this bloody conflict. Not recognizing Palestine means that the continuing policies of the Israeli government gets a tacit endorsement. The current horrendous bloodshed, which the UN Commission has rightly declared as a genocide, is not sustainable and must be met not just with condemnation, but real action. And part of that action is saying we reject the policies of the Israeli government in terms of what the future is. We stay quiet clearly. We recognize a Palestinian state. There will be a Palestinian state, and the people of Gaza and the West Bank will have homes to return to, and we're prepared to step up the plate and help support them.
Minister, this all sounds like wishful thinking because the reality on the ground points to a very different picture. Palestinians, however many of them will welcome this symbolic move, know that they do not need Ireland's recognition or the UK's or France's or Australia or any of the other Western countries. They do not need the recognition because they have the right to self-determination. It's an enshrined right in international law. Many believe that doing it now is meaningless.
I must say the points that you may fly directly in the face of the conversations that I've had with Palestinian ambassadors, with which our own Prime Minister has had with the Prime Minister of Palestine. They in fact are actually very grateful to countries like Ireland who are providing that recognition, providing that beacon of hope in the most darkest of times. But they also know that it isn't just a symbolic gesture. When I speak to Palestinian refugees who are living in Ireland, when I speak to their political and diplomatic leaders, it is quite clear that they know that there is a future, that the world believes in a future for them and is using that as part of the process to do everything to put pressure not just on the Israeli government, but indeed on the US government to stop this bloodshed and let real humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Neale Richmond, Minister of State for International Development, thank you so much for joining me. Now, while a growing number of countries are recognizing the State of Palestine, a report in September by the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry concluded that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. That conclusion elevates international legal obligations on states to take the necessary steps to stop the genocide and punish its perpetrators. Joining us now is Chris Sidoti, a member of the UN Commission. Chris Sidoti, the UN Commission's report concluded unequivocally that Israel is committing a genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. How critical, how important was it for you to call it a genocide?
We've been investigating and fact-gathering for 2 years now. We were able to look at both direct and indirect evidence. The direct evidence comes from the statements from the mouths of the Israeli leaders themselves, both political leaders and military leaders. We took their statements right from the 7th of October 2023. Now, I guess we could have said that the statements made on that day and the next couple of days were heat of the moment type statements, except for the fact that they were so widespread and the same kinds of statements are still being made, including by the President, the Prime Minister, the former Defence Minister in the past and the current Defence Minister now, and so many other Israeli officials. The statements are not the only evidence that were required. We first had to look at the question of whether genocidal acts had been committed. And having reported in separate reports on the destruction of healthcare, the destruction of the education system, the policy of starvation, the sex and gender-based violence, the killings, the impact on land and housing, we have progressively over 2 years looked at the impact of each sector of life within Gaza as a result of the Israeli operations. Only then, only when we established the various genocidal acts, did we come to discuss genocidal purpose. And then the whole pattern, the results of all of our reports over a 2-year period were taken into account.
How much legal and political weight do these findings have? Because the designation itself should have major moral, legal, political ramifications. But will it, given the current political dynamic?
It certainly should, and particularly because this is the most comprehensive and authoritative report on the question of genocide to come out of the international system, and will remain so until the International Court of Justice delivers its decision, maybe in 2 or perhaps 3 years. This report must be taken serious because it is dealing with continuing events. It hasn't stopped. The fact is that the International Court of Justice, in its first orders in January last year, January 2024, triggered the obligation of states to act to prevent genocide. Our report just reinforces that finding from the International Court of Justice and heightens the obligation on states to act now, not to wait.
How do you make sure that states implement their legal obligations to use all the means available to them to stop a genocide?
We can't make sure. We don't have that kind of power. The only institution that has that power is the Security Council, and it's totally dysfunctional, not just in relation to Gaza, but in relation to almost any contemporary crisis. So we have to forget about the Security Council. Our job is to alert individual states and groups of states like the European Union, the African Union, the Organization of American States, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, to alert groups of states and individual states. The obligations under international law lie on individual states, not on the United Nations Security Council alone. And if the Security Council fails, individual states have to act.
But will these states act when, let's face it, they are being intimidated, they are being bullied? The UN Secretary General himself said a few days ago that the world should not be intimidated by Israel, yet after the release of the UN Commission's report, he himself refused to use the word genocide. Were you surprised? Were you disappointed?
I think the Secretary General is looking at political issues at the moment rather than legal issues, and that's his prerogative.
But should we
States
have
are acting
stood firmly
already.
behind
Some
your
states have done a
conclusions?
lot.
Mr. Sidoti,
I'm sorry?
would you have expected the Secretary-General to have supported your conclusions?
I certainly expect that the Secretary-General will see our conclusions as the most authoritative to date and the most authoritative into the future. My hope and my expectation is that he will be referring to the report of our Commission on many occasions when discussing the situation in Gaza. That's my expectation.
But to date,
But you asked, if I can go back, you asked about
But
states.
Right.
And I think the situation of states is important. Many states, perhaps most, have taken some action. What we're saying in our report is that what has been done to date is nowhere near enough. And we are calling for firmer action, less talk and more action coming from all states.
But the Genocide Convention specifically calls on states to act to stop
Yes.
or prevent a genocide and to punish the perpetrators of a genocide. Have any states taken this type of action?
We are seeing that action taken, yes. We are seeing already the International Criminal Court investigating the situation in Palestine. It has issued arrest warrants in relation to Netanyahu and Gallant, although those arrest warrants to date have not included the crime of genocide. In our report, we recommend to the court that it broaden its investigations and expand the arrest warrants to include the crime of genocide. We have also had a number of individual states approach our Commission for assistance in investigations that are occurring at the national level. So we are seeing actions already, and I anticipate that we will see more.
Israel called you and the other members of the Commission, as you know, Hamas proxies. Are you concerned that you could be sanctioned by Israel?
Look, I'd be concerned about that if there were a shred of truth to the allegation, but there's not. As I say, this is just the same kind of rhetoric that is constantly recycled by the Israeli authorities. And everyone knows that they keep lying, and so no one takes them seriously. I certainly don't.
Professor Sidoti, you also spoke in your report about the widespread and systematic targeting of children as part of a strategy to destroy the biological continuity and future existence of Palestinians in Gaza.
There have been around 20,000 children killed, or I should say more than. 20,000 children's bodies have been firmly identified. There will be thousands of others under the rubble because most of Gaza is rubble. There have been tens of thousands, scores of thousands who have been injured. We have evidence from doctors, both local and foreign doctors, who have been present in the hospitals, that children have been deliberately targeted. By that I mean that a child has been shot and killed with a single shot to the head or to the chest near the heart. No shrapnel, no evidence of buildings falling or anything falling on the child, simply a single shot to the head or to the heart. This indicates that the child has been deliberately targeted.
What punitive measures can you expect for any government to take against Israel to stop this deliberate killing of children?
I think we have to divide into two categories. One is punitive, but the other is pressure. So perhaps I can deal separately with each. States can certainly put pressure on Israel now. Punitive is a separate issue. That's after the event. It's not preventative. And punitive means that action must be taken to punish those responsible for the perpetuation of genocide. These crimes have no statute of limitations. The Israeli leaders who are responsible for these international crimes can be held accountable at any time in the future. And I hope, and I'd go further, I expect that the time will come when they are held accountable, when they are tried, and if they are convicted, then punished.
Finally, let me ask you, Mr. Sidoti, about this moment at the United Nations when so many Western governments are rushing to recognize the State of Palestine rather than, you might argue, recognize that there is a genocide going on and trying to put an end to it. How do you view this moment?
It's not either or. We need both. Recognition of the State of Palestine is necessary to continue the two-state approach. Jewish state and Arab state, Palestinian state, is what the United Nations General Assembly decided should be established there. That decision was made in 1947. It has never come to reality so far as the Palestinian state is concerned. There has been a fundamental shift. Now that recognition has occurred, we can move on. We can look now at what other steps are necessary. So I think it's good that it's happened. I think it's necessary that it's happened, but it's far from sufficient, particularly when 80 to 100 people are being killed in Gaza every day. That's what needs to stop.
Chris Sidoti, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Global recognition of Palestine is now accelerating from London to Ottawa, from Canberra to Paris. But the United Nations genocide finding raises a starker challenge. Recognition without action risks normalizing what the Genocide Convention was meant to prevent. The law is not ambiguous. States must ensure they're not enabling violations through weapons, trade, or political cover. That's the bar now, not just the diplomatic language and lofty statements made at the UN General Assembly. As more capitals move on statehood, the focus will now be on what they do next. Align their policies with their legal obligations, or watch the gap between recognition and responsibility grow, and the credibility of the entire UN system continue to diminish. That's all from Merida Fakhri and the team. Thanks for watching.